We'll open the meeting at 7:30. Will we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May I have roll call, please?
Mr. Pitzer?
Mr. Harrell?
Here.
Mr. Colber?
Here.
Mr. Cusero?
Here.
Mr. Nushai? Ms. Redmond?
Here.
Mr. Scott?
Here.
Mr. Solomon?
Here.
Mr. Watson? Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item number 4 is approval of this agenda in front of us tonight. If no one has any changes, it's okay it as is. Any change? No
Just
change?
one comment from me. If I'm right, that's quite a bit of material for one meeting. I appreciate the ambitiousness of it, but I also don't want this meeting to go till 11:30 at night. I feel like sustainability deserves a meeting all its own. So, but we've also got the short-term rental discussion as well, and the master plan update. So that just seems like a lot. But I don't know what other. I'm not lobbying for one over the other. It seems like a lot.
Okay, so if you don't want to change anything in the agenda, it's per se.
I was just going to postpone one of the items if other commissioners felt appropriate, but I don't want to make that in a vacuum.
You can postpone an item when you get to it as well, so if we get deep into the evening, and we're feeling like we've got to move on from something, we can always do that.
You could bring it up under other business if it's something else.
Sure.
Okay, in that case, I will approve this agenda. Agenda item number 5 is approval of the regular meeting minutes from January 24th, 2023.
I make a motion to approve the agenda, or the minutes from, what date was that? I'm sorry.
January 24th.
January 24th, 2023.
I have a motion, do I have support?
Yeah, I'll support that. Yeah.
Motion support, roll call, please.
It's a hard one.
Mr. Colber?
Yes.
Mr. Cusero?
Yes.
Ms. Redmond?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
I abstain. I
Mr.
wasn't here.
Solomon?
It's hard to approve.
Okay.
Support. Yes.
Thank you. And Mr. Harrell?
Yes.
All right, motion carries.
Motion carries, thank you. Agenda item number 6 is public discussion, items not on the agenda. Is there anyone here from the public wishing to speak? Seeing none, I will then close public discussion. And we'll move right along to agenda item number 7, Sustainability Committee Framework Report.
Thank you. Prior to the last scheduled meeting, you were provided with the Sustainability Framework Report. Obviously, of course, that meeting did not happen, so we are going to be going through it tonight. This started a couple of years ago, the Sustainability Committee has been working diligently on producing this framework ever since. I'm going to put a presentation up on the screen in just one second. Just make sure it goes, okay. So, like I said, it started a couple years ago, and we'll go through some of the history here, and we'll actually talk about the content of the framework, what the group that formed to develop the framework was, and where it might go from here. So sustainability and resiliency were two terms that we had to define for the city as part of the development of this framework. So sustainability is having systems and policies in place that meets residents' current material, financial, and social needs without compromising the ability of future residents to meet their needs. And then resiliency, being able to meet the basic needs of all residents, even in the face of short and long-term threats, difficulties, and stressors, and to quickly recover from disruptions. So, why did we make this sustainability framework? So, there was in the city a few years ago a desire to create a focus on sustainability and resiliency as part of building support for a healthy and vibrant community. And to build on some of the sustainability actions that the city had already taken or was already thinking about, of course, we were going through a pretty, what felt pretty cataclysmic at the time, stressor on our society, that being the COVID pandemic. And of course, climate change is already well underway. We had heard a lot about resident concerns about the impact of climate change and other environmental stresses. And in early 2020, the city set out to create a sustainability committee to develop a framework to guide us forward on sustainability issues in the city. And that was established through the Planning Commission. So the Planning Commission actually established that committee. And it had 3 goals, one of which was a short-term goal and the other of which were looking beyond that first goal. So the first goal was to develop a framework for a citywide sustainability and resiliency plan. The next step after that would be to develop the plan itself, and then once the plan is developed, assist in guiding the development of ordinances that further the goals of the sustainability and resiliency plan. So it's kind of a 3-step deal. And we're, of course, at the end of the first step here. So the framework had a few components. One was, of course, to define resiliency and sustainability, which I already gave you those definitions there. To establish some focus areas, to assess kind of what we might already know, to set goals, and then to develop the framework that will prioritize what happens in the development of a sustainability plan. So in early 2021, the initial membership of the committee was recruited and the monthly meetings began, and I want to say the first one was May 2021. There was a community survey that was distributed in November, and from November to December, 142 residents and business owners responded to that survey. And then after the survey, the committee really started meeting monthly to review the survey results in relation to some specific areas of sustainability and resiliency that were identified up front, and then to develop some goals and benchmarks for data collection for each area. So along the way, the committee also hosted a little Earth Day event where they basically provided some information that was very focused on trees and the benefits of Arbor Day, not Earth Day. Trees and the benefits of a tree canopy to a city. And we also, every other month, released a newsletter through the Clausen website and social media. And that was generally written by members of the committee. So the guiding principles that were developed at the outset of this framework development were equity, so working to get people what they need to be successful, leveraging access and resources that already exist, looking out for each other, taking the small city with a big heart motto seriously, balancing infrastructure needs, maintenance, and costs, relying on and sharing true information that's grounded in science, and that is actually, vetted out and based on real research. Being data-driven, so figuring out what data we needed in the first place and where we might be able to find it. Constant learning. It's the sustainability environment is a constantly changing thing as technologies change, as the climate situation changes. We're always having to adjust what we know and how we're using it. Being solution-oriented and open-minded, and then transparency in our plans and initiatives. So every time that the Sustainability Committee met, it was available to the public. The meeting times and attendance information were all posted. They were held virtually, all the meetings, so anyone could tune in if they wanted to. And we did have drop-ins on a fairly regular basis. So the survey asked a lot of questions, and we do have the full responses available for anyone who wants to see them. Most of the respondents were residents. It was about 96%. Less than half of those were actually property owners, though. So we had a mix of renters and owners who responded to the survey. About 5% of them work in Clawson. We didn't have any business owners identify them as such. I know from talking to a few people that a couple people who live in Clawson and also own businesses in Clawson took the survey. They just didn't identify themselves that way when they took it. The largest group of respondents was between the ages of 25 and 34, which tracks closely with, I think, populations that are generally interested in these issues, and younger than 25 also tends to be quite interested in this because I think they feel the need for some urgent action because it is going to heavily impact their own future. Most of the people who responded to this felt that they were knowledgeable about climate change issues. And 83% said they felt that they understood the science behind it. So there is, of course, a little bit of confirmation bias effect in who took the survey, because people who took the survey were generally people who were already interested in the topic. So that is something that we had to keep in mind every time we talked about the survey results and where it was leading us.
Joe, do you? Sorry, I don't, that was in our packet, that part right there? Did you
Yeah,
have
that-
a total number of respondents?
Yeah, 142.
142
Yep.
respondents? Do you have a percentage of what that is, or
I
turnout?
would have to do the math as a percentage of the population. And of course, like a part of our population is like under 10, so they probably, so I would have to actually separate
Right.
things out and figure out like the
Okay.
percentage of the population that took
142,
it.
okay.
But yeah, we could do that. This is just a little kind of word cloud showing the terms that came up most frequently in the responses. And one that I think the biggest one there is flooding, which of course I think everybody sitting here probably understands why that's like the most prominent word up there. Because it speaks to a lot of things. It speaks, to infrastructure management, and it speaks to our built environment, but it also speaks to, the way the weather is changing and what we think we might, unfortunately, have to anticipate more of in the future. So managing that is definitely at the forefront of pretty much everyone's mind. And that includes people who are otherwise generally interested in sustainability issues. So we wound up with a list of 14 goals, and half of them are on this slide and the other half are on the next slide. But they all generally speak to the same things. And when the committee, and these guys who are on the committee can attest to this, when the committee was trying to prioritize them at the end, we kept saying, oh, that one needs to be near the top. Oh, that one should be near the top. So we kind of wound up with this cluster of all these goals that needed to be near the top. But at any rate, it seems like most of these things come out as fairly high priorities. But there are certain ones that really are, extremely urgent. And flooding, of course, winds up as number one. Reduce the likelihood of flooding due to extreme precipitation events. This is something we all, I think, understand the need to work on now. Improving the ability of all residents to meet their basic needs, even in the face of external challenges, and quickly recover from disruptions. So that speaks to a lot of different things. But, one of the more acute things it speaks to is when we have, for instance, a heat wave or something like that. Does everybody have a place to go? Are we making sure that we're covering people's basic immediate needs anytime that we have an acute challenge that we need to face? Increasing the share of energy used from clean energy sources. There are a lot of different ways we can do that. Some of that comes from the property owner side of someone deciding that they're going to put solar panels on their house. Some of it could potentially come from the municipal side as well. Reducing waste sent to landfills, that's something that we would need to coordinate with agencies, particularly SOCRA, but it's definitely something that we want to be thinking about. Using vacant property to the benefit of the community. This isn't just an environmental sustainability thing. This is also kind of a social sustainability thing. I think the effect of vacant property when it's not just used, but when it's allowed to kind of look vacant, has a detrimental social effect. So that's one that kind of crosses into a couple other areas aside from just environmental sustainability. Increase the healthy tree canopy throughout the city. So we have some streets that are very, very heavily treed and others that are not as heavily treed. And then we have tree stock that, there's some of it needs maintenance and some of it is very healthy. So kind of looking at what we've got and where we could improve and where maybe some more maintenance could be done is something that calls for. Balancing the transition to electric vehicles with other sustainability and community considerations. Electric vehicles are definitely coming one way or another, and we have to figure out how we're going to manage that as a community. The next half of the goals here, residents are informed and aware of environmental sustainability issues and how they can contribute to mitigating and adapting to adverse effects. So this is sort of an educational goal, and that could be handled a number of different ways. Increasing opportunities and support for alternative modes of transportation. This is another one that requires us to look at the agencies in the region and how we might be able to work with them. But also there's some things that we can do right here with, for instance, bicycle infrastructure on streets that we own. Support new and existing businesses in Clawson and being local leaders in sustainability. So that's kind of an economic development goal there where we could work with interested businesses. And we did have quite a few interested businesses early on who were very enthusiastic participants, but the pandemic really challenged a lot of them to remain involved. So they've all remained on the mailing list, but a lot of them had to drop out of the meetings, unfortunately. The owners of Sozai in particular were very, very involved up front, and then found that they could not continue to attend all the meetings just because they had so much going on. And then they were named Restaurant of the Year, and their lives were turned upside down. So we would like to definitely find ways to work on that with the business community. Identifying a venue for community events that could pertain to sustainability, but also other things, and that's part of the social sustainability aspect of it, of weaving the fabric of a community. Promoting sustainable practices through city zoning and ordinances. And that, of course, is something that would follow on from a sustainability plan. But there are things that we can do right now as well. We've already updated our landscaping regulations, for instance. Inventorying volunteer opportunities and understanding community needs for volunteers. This could go in a lot of different directions, some of which are identified in the framework. And it could include everything from leveraging organizations that are already working to establishing something like a time bank where perhaps someone who no longer has the capability for mowing their lawn might be able to tap into that time bank, and people are offering their time in there and might be able to take care of that for someone. Ferndale has a time bank, for instance, that could serve as a model. And support households in being financially literate and able to meet their financial needs was the final goal there. So it covers a lot of ground, but they're all definitely different aspects of building a sustainable community and outside the city more of a sustainable society. Each goal, I don't have all the goals in here because that would just take a long time. But I wanted to at least point out, I and Stephanie, my colleague who created this presentation, she wanted to be here, but unfortunately had a conflict. I just wanted to point out the components of each goal, 3-page section of the plan. So we start out by just summarizing the goal briefly and then addressing what's already being done. What might be possible. We've included some of the opinions that we got from the survey on each of the goals. And then we move then into a discussion of what data we already have. So, for instance, under the flooding goal, we've created a map that shows where we have a lot of impervious surface and where our development is most intense. So you can see, for instance, over in the Westgate area at the west end of 14 Mile, there is a lot of impervious surface there. So it gives us a sense of where we might be getting a lot of runoff from and where there might be a need to look at potentially some future mitigation. And then finally, what we've done is we've identified some benchmarks that we could use in the development of a plan and some possible data sources. And then other resources and potential collaborators. So who are some organizations that in the process of developing a sustainability and resiliency plan, who are some resources that we could reach out to help us develop that plan? And make it into something that's actually implementable. And then the end of the document identifies kind of what the next steps are. So creating action strategies, and that's really the heart of developing a sustainability plan, a full-blown plan. And we envision that the sustainability plan would be a component of a master plan update. And it might be a portion of the master plan update that the sustainability committee could direct and then provide to the planning commission for its input and its feedback and revisions. And then once you've got your action strategies, then you really reach out to those partners, you identify some resources, you share the plan, and you take action. So the PC's role at this time is to provide some feedback and comments on the sustainability framework. And obviously, you can do as much of that tonight. And if you feel like you need maybe a little more time with it and you want to provide more feedback and comments at a future meeting, that's also fine. It's you're in charge of the time frame here. You can choose ultimately to accept and adopt the framework or request that the committee engage in some further study. Granted, this is not the full plan. It's the framework to create a plan. So it's certainly not going to have a lot of those actual action items in it that we envision would be part of the creation of a plan. If the framework is adopted, it would be forwarded to City Council. And then if more study is needed, we would just ask that you provide direction on what you had in mind. And that's the end of the presentation. And I hope you've all had a chance to go through the framework document. And if you've got comments or questions on that, this is the opportunity. I also have Bob and Glenn, who both were heavily involved in the development of the framework. And if either of them would like to say anything at this point, you're more than welcome to. So.
You want to go first one? Sure, why not? Well,
Here, let me get my laptop out of your way.
hi. It's been a while since I've been here. Glenn Shepard, 151 Charlevoix.
Feels different, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, not from this side. So, yeah, when this came up, it was, obviously we've been having a series of floods, right, over year after year after year. And this, not necessarily that was the catalyst for it, but it was one thing that we realized that it needed to be part of something else. And that's where it all stemmed from. But at the same time, as everyone knows, I'm here to champion our trees in our community, and this all kind of like fell into that. And I really appreciate the work that Mr. Tangari and Ms. Osborne has done in order to put this together. From the early start on realizing that we needed to have this as part of Planning Commission, as part of our structure, rolled into a master plan so that we do have some better ideas on what we can do, which is sustainable. And it kind of surprised me as we went through this process of what was identified as being sustainable, and I'd never really considered that. And it kind of broadened it into other things that we felt were important. One of them that was on there is a public venue for activities, like a band shell or something like that. Something to start thinking about. It doesn't necessarily need to be that, but it was one thing that we don't have a movie theater that's specifically ours. We don't have an entertainment center that's specifically for those types of things for our community. And that was kind of one of those things that kind of dovetailed into, well, loads of other things that are like this. I've certainly been inspired by the people that I've been able to interact with. We had a number of people early on, but we then kind of settled into a core group of people that were consistently and sharing ideas and cooperating and listening to each other and sharing ideas and supporting the process here. And I truly appreciate that. And in that light, I think that we've come up with a very good working document to start. Obviously, we'll iron out some things, and certainly here to continue the process and provide whatever support that I can, and other members, and highly encourage anybody else who's interested to sign up. I don't think we've not rejected anybody at this point, so so it's a good starting point to get involved. And highly encourage it. But it's been a pleasure so far. So, and I expect it to continue that way.
I assume you take what you learn, your data and your background and thing, and you pass it on to the city for ordinance changes. like, and she made up a list of trees that we like and trees that we don't like.
Oh, yeah, that was part of what we did. Yeah, that's kind of part of it was, that Joe mentioned, was the landscape ordinance change. And one of the other things that stemmed from it, and I think, did Stephanie add it to the report? So I did a, crazy, I know, but I did a 1,000-tree study of trees that are south of 14 Mile, and are trying to understand is where we are on, and again, this is the public trees, public right-of-way trees, and where we are at risk, and what we can do to try and mitigate that. So I found out that over, what was it, like, not to get too specific, but like 75%, three-quarters of our trees are all maple species that are in the public right-of-way. And that's not sustainable. That will be an ecological disaster waiting to happen. And so that was part of what we did for the,
Why is that?
why is that?
What?
Oh, I'm sorry, why is that?
In case they come
Well,
down with a disease.
it's just repeating what happened with the ash trees, right? So no one expected the emerald ash borer because it was never a risk item until, somebody opened a crate from China in Brownstown Township, and that's then an ecological disaster happened at that point. Besides EAB, you've got the DED, Dutch elm disease, and then so what's coming from the southwest part of the state is potentially Asian longhorn beetle, which would happen to, they particularly like maple trees. So again, that's one of those that if you have, in this part of it, that we talk about biodiversity, what's sustainable, and you can use diversity into many aspects of sustainability, but that was one that was easy to tackle at first, and that was part of what we tried initially at our Arbor Day function. I don't know if we've got anything in place yet for that, but maybe we, not yet, yeah, so we'll probably do that as a biannual, maybe.
Glenn, can I ask a question
Sure.
about trees in particular?
Yeah.
Because it's been a while since we did the landscaping ordinance. We haven't had a chance, we haven't had the opportunity to have it before us very often. Part of, as a homeowner, my concern, aside from, like, diseases will come with almost any tree can be prone to a disease. More so a concern would be the sewer, right? Because, so have we kind of identified a specific tree that is sustainable and won't get into sewer lines and won't uproot and cause damage? Is there a miracle tree?
Oaks, they have a large, deep taproot. But the problem with oak trees is that they don't transplant well, which goes back to if we have an opportunity to review what we can put in the right of way, how that would be administered and maintained. It's really difficult. But it's possible. But also is part of the landscaping ordinance that we passed. And again, the ordinance was strictly for public spaces, but at the same time, it provided a framework for anybody who wanted to see that, okay, what will work in the right of way, what will possibly work on our lawn. And those trees are listed in there, and it's from type of tree to height and so forth. And part of what you'll find in the packet is that you'll have one picture of a street that has bright autumn colors throughout it, and then the next street over is barren.
Yeah, so in that, does it give like deep root bearing tree versus, does it identify that as like roots go this far deep and this is how far our sewers are, so
Yeah.
it seems pretty safe?
Well, part of it is that it'll take about 30 years, give or take, for the trees to start to infiltrate and have that type of effect. But at the same time, you'll know where, and DPW certainly can mark these out, and I don't want to speak for them, but that roots will find water. There's nothing you can do about it. But at the same time, what is identified that trees can help mitigate rain runoff. They can hold up to, I think, 500 gallons of water in an average rainstorm. It's just amazing that if once you have a mature tree, what that can provide, not just for perceived home values, but for shade, the reduction of microclimate, and heat islands, those types of things. And
I was
certainly-
gonna, sorry not to interrupt,
Yeah,
but
no, okay.
I was gonna ask that, because I thought that would be an interesting, if you are to put like a little info sheet out,
Mm-hmm.
it'd be interesting to say, like, this tree will mitigate 2 inches of water for every 4 inches of water that you get. And I don't know if you've broken down those proportions.
That's
but-
out there, and I don't know if we included the iTree report. So there's, Davy Tree does, yeah, there's a link, and Davy Tree and government have, it's called iTree. And you can find what the value is of a particular tree at what age it is. And that'll show what the value is, what it can provide for your property, and it's a pretty useful tool. Yeah, I think we could find that link.
I think that'd be great for residents to be able to access, right? And just,
absolutely, yeah.
like, cool, let me find some trees that will do these things.
And that site too also had an opportunity, I don't know if it still is maintained, but to provide an inventory of what we have. So I think that at some point in time, we might need to do that. Again, I started it on my own, just to try, and it was too monstrous to continue, but obviously 1,000 trees are a sample size enough to know that, for Clausen, we can go into any other community, that if you don't address that, then we're going to have a problem. But it's also part of sustainability, educating on, and it's not just trees, it's everything else that we're trying to do. So that, for what those trees are that you have an opportunity, if you don't like one, here's maybe another opportunity. And for the street trees that are out there, for the one street that was barren, there may be mitigating circumstances that won't allow it. But at the same time, what's listed in our ordinance is that, well, you can have a 15-foot tree. And I don't want to get into the details of that, but those are opportunities as well, that may be an option. And that's also an option that, hey, here's a good list for what's available in our community from local retailers. And, that's something to as a thought starter to think about. So, but it's been a real pleasure to
I think
be on
it's
this.
a good example of the trees, that you're actually coming up with something, passing it on to mayor and council, and we're going to change our ordinance. Transportation is one of the other things you looked at, and you encourage bicycles in town. And I find it humorous that on planning commission, when we put a building in, we requested they put a bicycle rack outside. But I believe our city ordinance says you're not allowed to ride your bicycle on the sidewalk.
I think it's not in the street in downtown. I think you actually have to ride it on the sidewalk, but not in the residence,
I
right?
think, I'd have to look at the ordinance closer. I think you have to walk it through town or something.
Yeah.
It's like we're trying to be bicycle friendly. You can come and park your bike, but we don't really want you riding around that much.
Yeah,
We're going to be in real trouble when Royal Oak decides to put their bicycle thing coming down Main Street.
oh, there sure
Once they
is, or
hit
the bike
Normandy,
lanes.
we're
Well, they
gonna-
end where it is right now in
Yeah.
Washington, or not in Washington, but on Main Street. But yeah, yeah, we already have bike paths, and we can certainly one of those things is encouraging bike usage.
I see quite a few more bikes nowadays than we have in the past, yeah, so it's working.
Yep.
Well, and that's something that, as Nick knows, I talked to Nick about, I'm very much in favor of being able to expand, even in our city park. There's a bunch of dead ends on
yeah.
our bike paths. Being able to get from one part, not that our city park is huge, but like being able to know that you can like take the sidewalk and not have to like walk your bike the rest of the way, like take it to continue. It'd be nice to get a little bit of a bike path to where people can walk strollers, ride bikes in a continuous area where they don't have to stop for cars every 3 seconds or just to get out, So I am all for that, 100%.
I think we have a bike path that's already dedicated. Whether the signs are still there, they sometimes wander
I just
about
mean
and
freely without having to worry about cars every
Absolutely,
2
yeah.
seconds. Yeah.
No, one time I tried to follow the route following the signs and came to a dead end. I'm like, okay,
Yep.
well, where am I supposed to go from here because the sign's missing, right?
Yeah.
So that's something obviously that's an easy fix to some degree, right? And then certainly promoting that, would also be part of that. Dovetailing in all of that, we touched on electric vehicles and what that might mean for the infrastructure, in consideration for new technology is one of the things, if I remember correctly, on when we have site plans, what are they bringing to the table? Obviously, that may be something. In fact, I think Ace Hardware, didn't they have EV charging stations or at one point?
in there.
Yeah. So,
Well, and I wonder too, because eventually this is all gonna somehow we're going to bring this in to a master plan, to the CIP, to the,
Yep.
Right? We're going to all come together. And a lot of our master plan and CIP has to do with accessing grants. And I know that there have been, I don't know currently what the grant status is for like EV charging stations and things like that. But, you know, I don't expect you to have an answer right now. But like in the future, how we might bring all these components together and work in a seamless manner of, you know, with the administration and planning commission to figure out the best resources and the best way to like source grants and other opportunities for the city.
Yeah, because that's going to happen, right? That, you know, as we transition out of the ICE, internal combustion engine, and go into EVs, that there's I was reading the article on the Belvedere plant being added by Stellantis, and that there's still a concern over the gap in cost between what it makes to produce an ICE and transitioning into EVs, and what that additional cost is going to mean for the marketplace. And that's also something that we need to, I think, in some ways, keep in mind on how we transition when everybody, you know, in our community will advance in someday, you know, whenever that may be, 60 years from now when there's no more ICE, but I still can't quite grasp that, right? I think there's still going to be some remnant of that. But that's also part, how do you balance that, right? And because that's the sustainability aspect of it. You
Because
just
I can
can't
say
just
right
make
now,
it-
if our roads are still not fixed, people won't like an EV
Yeah.
station, you know?
It's true.
Right? We can't go ahead and do that. But yeah, no, I think you guys did great work. A lot of information, obviously. I kind of forgot about you guys over there
Yeah.
for a while.
Well,
But you've been busy.
It was really hard to, I think we had 15, I think, so we really got rid of one. I don't remember what it was anymore, but,
Yeah.
you know, we said 15's too much, well, we can go with 14. So,
This was prepared by Giffords?
Yeah,
Yeah, we prepared it in consultation with the committee, and basically we managed the document, yeah. Bob, did you want to?
Yeah.
And then Josh is also was also on the committee, so we'll make sure he
Short.
gets a
I know you
chance.
guys have a lot of other things to get to. Bob Berlin, 668 Bowers Street. Little short background about myself. My wife and I bought the house from her grandma in 2019. So we're the fourth generation, including our 2-year-old and the one we have on the way, hopefully next week. Hopefully when we get that baby out of my wife soon. Long story short, I love Clausen. The way that we kind of approach the committee, I think everyone could kind of back this up, is normal people who want to try to make the city a better place, want to try to do little things around the edges to try to work on sustainability and all these big issues when they have time. But it's hard at the end of the day, after working all day, putting the kids down, to try to figure out what's most impactful and what would be helpful. So that's kind of the approach we tried to take. So whether it's like, you know, if our daughter ends up buying the house from us in 2050 and she's at a committee meeting here and talking about ways to make the city better, or if it's just us worrying about our property values and how we can make, you know, Clausen even more attractive to new people and new businesses and have our property values go up selfishly. That's kind of the approach we took. So appreciate all the work you guys do in considering this, and yeah, happy to continue working with you guys in whatever form it takes moving forward.
Take it.
Thank you.
Yeah, so final comments, since I was part of the committee and I'm on this commission. I think we said it pretty well. I just wanted to kind of reiterate a couple things that I heard that I think are important. So, you know, we talk about sustainability, you're talking about, you know, climate change and things. Those can be polarizing to some. So I do want to just reiterate that this plan really did look across, you know, those three factors or three dimensions that I mentioned in the packet, which was environmental, which is, I think, what most people kind of cling to, we think about, but there was social and economic, as Joe kind of pointed out as well. So it's really about tying this together in the master plan and thinking about infrastructure, which I know is going to be a goal, and I think is kind of missing in the current master plan, along with well-being of the everyday person here in the city. So I think there's a good balance within the goals in terms of those three different dimensions, I think there is an opportunity to, as we continue this, to kind of hone in on a few. But the main point today is that there's a lot of information here that I think will help direct our master plan and other things we do in the city. So I'd like to continue that, because right now it's kind of outlined, as you guys saw in the packet, around what data is available. We talked to our own residents and had them fill out what's important to them, and then the data sources around, where can you get more information, as Joe pointed out, impervious services, grants for EVs, all that good stuff. So I just wanted to say, for me, this is a key resource, I believe, kind of going forward. So it's something that I know I support, obviously being a part of this, but I hope it's something that you guys will all consider as well. Hopefully at the time to read through it, it is very long, and there's a lot of information, but I think it really helps us hone into what's going to be most critical moving forward for the residents of Clawson.
Yeah, with that said, I did like the component about, well, I believe it was under equity, right? And especially the last week or so, I noticed Hunter Community Center was like, we're a warming place. And I think about our large senior citizen, we have a larger proportion of senior citizens right now in Clawson. And their ability to access information, I think, is very important, because, through the last couple of years, I've noticed a lot of them might talk about how they're used to being able to come to the city and get that information, and they don't have all that. So in terms of mitigating, water and all these things, it can be a lot to take on, but knowing that, finding a place where they can find all that information and find a resource if they need help, I think is huge. And I know it's a direct item on our master plan. So I think that developing that further is great, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, if I could add onto that, thank you also for all of the hard work put into this. I look at this as a guide. There's no debate. We have to look at everything we do in these dimensions. And first and foremost for me as a resident is flooding, because I've experienced a great deal of expense and misery, tremendous misery, for the flooding issue. So I really am excited about it, because I think it's something we can all rally around. And then, I'm going to arbitrarily and probably offend someone here, but there's something on the 14th list here. The goal number 14, by definition, is the last goal, and I'm not even going to look it up because I don't want to offend anybody. But picture that one, okay? And we'll just say that one's unfortunately going to have to come last. I don't look at it that way. I just think these are dimensions that we should be holding each other accountable to when we make ordinances and when we make suggestions, or when we consider site plans. It doesn't cost us anything to go to this document and be considerate of these things. So, and I'm definitely going to be considering trees. I may have planted 1,000 Yoshino trees not too far south from here, and that's not diverse at all, and I feel really bad now, so thanks for that, Glenn.
Not to make you feel guilty.
But we have a phrase in engineering called fixing stuff that isn't broken and reinventing the wheel. And there are a fair number of residents that are watching government get bigger and bigger and bigger because we invent means to over-legislate so many things. So my challenge to all of us, not to the Sustainability Committee that's done wonderful work, is that there may be a tool that is on the books today to get some of these things done properly that doesn't require us to omnibus a whole new government that has express delegation of power or responsibilities to do it. The worst thing that could possibly happen, and I promise you it has already happened in some cities, is it's ambiguous. Is it the Sustainability Committee job to do something, or is it the city manager's job to do something, or DPW's job to do something? And before you know it, it's just a bunch of finger pointing while everybody's basement floods. I maintain the reason the basements are flooding right now is not because there's rain in the front yard. There's sewer water coming up through the sewers. That's not going to get fixed with anything other than fixing the sewer. And we have to take that seriously. So again, I think it's rallying for us all to be looking at flooding as a risk. But, as an example that's a little bit irritating, we're a landlocked town, and we have a very little amount of impervious surface. And what we chose to do was to take Shawm, and we're planning to take all of that field, and we're going to put houses or apartments in there, or not apartments, probably houses there, and take what little we have and make it less. This is not directionally correct with this, and it's not for this discussion, but like, you ask yourself, was sustainability considered in that decision? And there are other perspectives. There's revenue, there's houses, there's realtors, there's all these other things.
There's been a decision yet, though, Nate. To be fair, I don't think there's been a decision. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
But I'm a little bit, I'd like some time to digest this before we move to adoption, because I'm not sure whether, what the implications are of adopting it, so much as it is, are we really sure we're putting in this to its maximum benefit? In other words, roles, responsibilities, how do we integrate this with other documents? But if I could ask for a favor from the Sustainability Commission, it is to go through those goals and say, pretend for a moment that Sustainability Committee didn't exist at all. What would be the best place to address this item currently with the tools we have, the organizations that we have? Like, would it be DPW? Would it be the mayor? Would it be the city manager or something like
And
that?
I think Joe's standing up because I do want to say that because I got hung up a little bit during these meetings over the past year around, oh no, Josh, you're going too far ahead. This is just a framework, right? So what we're trying to do, and Joe, you can correct me, is we're bringing together all the resources, information we have today to say these are the focal points from residents of this community, from other sources, other communities.
Right.
And then what we're at, the turning point right now is, do we move forward with a plan? And
Right.
working towards a plan, which I believe, to your point, because this committee, Sustainability Committee, is not going to make decisions, from my understanding. They're going to help inform the bodies here to live up to these goals. So, Joe, maybe you can expand on kind of what the next steps are.
Sure, yeah. So all that role and responsibility assignment is definitely part of the plan, a sustainability plan. That's what, all of that, we put it in someone's hands and we say, we might even break it down into timeframes, We have a short-term, a mid-term, and a long-term subset of this particular goal. And, the DPW takes the reins on this part of it, and maybe also they get some help from the DDA in certain parts of the city. And that's really part of the plan. That's when you're getting to, here's the hard part of the plan, the implementation. You establish all of that. So the framework sets you up to do the plan, but the plan is where that work actually happens.
I don't know, I don't want to keep talking if somebody else has but I wanted to piggyback off. Do you have anything? Okay. To your point, Nate, when we have a shared sewer system and we are dependent upon a sewer system that is interlocking with all the communities around us, I feel like we might, it sounds great to mitigate flooding, but the fact is that when all the communities around us get a lot of stormwater, that's coming up. Because we have a shared sewer, it runs down Red Run, it goes to Lake St. Clair, and we are kind of at will of how that sewer system works. And I'm not sure, and maybe this is something you plan to address, because when I go online, you go to like GLWA and all the different areas that are responsible for us, in like even the communities around us, they might have the same water supply, but they have a different sewer, and it gets very complex. Is there a real ability to us to fully mitigate flooding without getting in tap with all these companies that essentially have control of our water flow?
There has to be a mix of regional and local approaches. And the regional approach is obviously the big challenge, because that's a matter of outreach and coalition building and dealing with these various entities that have control over this or that. But locally, there are things that you can do to improve or, if appropriate, prevent infiltration in certain places that would further swell the system. So we can take proactive steps locally that will help locally and probably also a little bit outside the community as well. If we're helping ourselves, we're probably going to be helping people who are right nearby as well, and downstream in the system. But then, yes, we also have to engage with those regional bodies and those
And I know
other
DPW
agencies.
does that, right? They
Yes.
sit on the boards.
They're on
and,
a lot of
but, you know,
boards, yeah.
I think,
But may I ask, Ms. Redmond, what are you trying to?
well, I'm just trying to say that I don't think that.
Problems are harder than, and complex, that is understood.
Well, okay, but
ubiquitously.
no matter if we adopt all this today and put as 1,000 trees, we're gonna flood. That's just it. Like, because of how we have a shared sewer line. In the rainwater shares the sewer water and they connect. And it's not just in Clawson, it's all the communities, all the way down, 696. That, you put a backflow valve in your house, that's the best thing you can do, in my opinion, because then you don't have water coming back up. But other than that, if we mitigate things, we're still affected by all the communities around us in their rainwater and how well they're mitigating. So
I don't accept the futility of the effort. I think they're definitely.
I'm not trying to say that it's not worth an effort at all.
It has to be a mix, like I said, it has to be a
Yeah.
mix of local and regional effort.
And see where we're
and-
going, but I think we're getting a little off track
Yeah.
here. The
So the question really
the
is.
target now is that we want to accept their framework, do we want to send it on to mayor and council?
Well, this is, my points
These are
are,
discussions that they're going to have amongst themselves, and we can't cure it here. We can't.
oh, I'm not trying to cure it. I'm just saying maybe these are questions that I have as a citizen that might be addressed within here and speaking, like just points that you may be able to address with those
Yeah.
different components.
So,
This
yeah,
is-
I mean.
This is their first go-at, this is their first framework that they want to send on. I'm pleased with it, I'm very happy with it, and it will change constantly. It's
If I could make one
flux.
request to the Sustainability and Committee in preparation for the next meeting, if you could make a matrix of those 14 goals, 14?
14.
14 goals and where they currently live in our government. And
Yeah, some of them.
Maybe
some
they
of them
don't.
might be
Maybe
a
there's a
little
huge hole.
diffuse.
Nobody's
some
looking
of them
at
might be a
this,
hole.
right?
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I think we could probably.
if you could
figure
put it in
something
this
out.
format so that we can review what existing ordinances exist and where we are woefully under supporting these initiatives, we don't even have the framework to discuss them. So I don't know if we need to make a motion for that request or if you're fine just taking it off the cuff. But I think that would be so helpful to help us be participatory in your endeavors.
I agree.
I think they can take a verbal cue from that. What I'm going to be seeking now is a motion on this, whether we want to pass this on to mayor and council. I think we have to have a motion to that effect.
I actually would like to, go
I
ahead.
just want to make another statement. I'm going to go back to something that Commissioner Redmond said earlier when you're doing your presentation. Only 142 respondents? I mean, I don't pretend to know the population of Clawson. I don't. I need to, but I don't. But that seems woefully small. I mean, we're supposed to be doing the people's work here. It seems to me that we ought to be doing a little bit more outreach to get a little bit more information before we start making a bunch of decisions about what 142 residents felt in response to a survey.
I never got an invite for a survey.
Yeah, I can talk about, I work for JD Power, so I work for a market research firm. And our data scientists around the 200 mark is what we always look for to have a good sample size. I mean, it depends. What is going to be the issue is getting people to sit down to take a 10, 15-minute survey. So if there's another format we could think about, that might be my suggestion. But
And
what
that-
I found with online surveys, like response rates are anywhere from 2.5% to 5%.
Right, and when we move into doing an actual sustainability plan, there's a lot you can do in terms of providing multiple venues in multiple formats for people to provide their input. And the plan is where we get into action items and all that. So I think it's going to be very important to have, because for one thing, the Sustainability Committee never had a budget. And so we were doing things as much as we could without, blowing the planning department's budget. And a budget would come along with doing a sustainability plan, and we would build in a public input process to that would dovetail with the public input process for a larger plan. It's hard to get public input in general. Today, it's a major challenge. Farmington Hills is a much larger city than Clawson by population, and the survey that we did for their master plan over there, it was a big challenge to get over 400 responses, and they've got, more than 4 times as many people as we've got, about five times actually.
Well, but that's also a blessing for us, right? Because there may be other
Sure.
opportunities for us that they don't have because of
Yeah.
a smaller community. I mean,
We do.
I don't know how people feel about it, but I mean, just canvassing some areas of the city potentially might be a way to get some better
Yeah.
responses.
And I think
and I'm sure
that,
that we could find some volunteers that would go out and knock some doors.
and I think that we could also, in the course of doing a sustainability plan, leverage some of the local events that we have in the park and in downtown, and actually have like a little booth or something, kiosk.
I
where
think
people
that'd be
could
great,
drop
especially,
by.
again, considering not to go back to the senior citizens, but a lot of them still don't do the Facebook thing, and
Yeah.
I took the survey on Facebook, but I didn't know that I didn't see it was available outside of Facebook, but I saw it on Facebook and I took it.
Neither do people under 25, though. Like, none of them are on
won't
Facebook
use
either.
Yeah, that's true, yeah. So, I mean, I think it would, any way we can engage and get for everything we do,
Yeah.
for everything we do in planning, to find ways to engage.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that idea, Joe, of doing it at events.
The overall feeling I'm getting here is that nobody here wants to poo-poo this thing and just discard it or send it back for further information. I think we're all in agreement that we can adopt this.
I wouldn't go that far, Mr.
So-
Chair.
I'm looking for a motion, and we have a couple other items here that I think we're going
Yeah,
to spend much more time on.
Joe gave us some feedback here, or some paths, so if I could, and it can fail, but I'd like to make a motion
Okay.
that the Planning Commission direct the Sustainability Committee to engage in further study, seeking a little bit higher signal to noise through three issues, right? We talked about getting a matrix of having a reuse or proper domain for certain issues, right? It sounds like we're interested in getting a little bit more public opinion, so possibly having an actual scheduled public hearing just for this as a topic, right? So invite people, put it on the website. Hey, do we want to talk about sustainability? Let's put the full force of the government behind it. I'm making a terrible motion right now.
Yeah. Well,
So I'm going to make it shorter in a second with the third, with the third issue being to make sure we have all the key people here. So again, public hearing is fine. I'm just saying that if we could have the matrix established for review at the next time, and then possibly talk about ways we can get a little bit better feedback from it. I'll say just 2 things.
Okay.
So
I'll support, I kind of have a couple questions with that support.
Yeah.
You were saying feedback, what kind of feedback again?
So if we can have, we can schedule a public hearing, just to have people come in here and say, hey, you missed golf carts. We need golf carts. I don't know,
Oh, okay,
whatever.
okay. So you're talking about something different too, in, how they laid out who's, they have this little diagram here of the city council, Department of Public Works, where they kind of like went through the benchmark and the data source kind of thing. You want something more specific than that when you're talking about the matrix?
Want residents coming to us and saying,
I'm talking to your first point, sorry.
Oh.
For your first point, when you're saying the matrix, you want something more specific than their benchmark and their data source?
correct, entirely different thing. So, for example, what's a goal here? Flooding, right? So goal is to prevent flooding, I think. So who in the government currently governs this issue? Who makes sure we have big enough sewer pipes for the number of houses we have, for example, right? Where does that live currently, and is there requirements there? That's the spirit of that request. So if
You're asking that they put that information in before you approve this and move this on to
I think,
stream?
as always, we're kind of getting off topic just a little
Yes.
bit, and I don't mean to, I'm just using this
Sure.
as open discussion.
Yeah.
Similar to the master plan, which I think is on the agenda later,
Right.
we need to ask city council to approve to move forward with a plan, which I feel like is where a lot of the things we're looking for is going to come up. Because at this point, we've asked a lot of the locals, everybody in the residents of Clawson, to have their input between a survey, the open meetings monthly, and I know there was posts about this meeting today. I just feel like that is just a holdup in terms of trying to get them to input more on the framework, because this framework is going to turn into a plan. And when we do the plan is when we want to prioritize our list of objectives, to bring in which data that we need around who will be in charge of what pieces and what can be done from a legislative perspective. So again, I know we get hung up a little bit on the next step, and the immediate next step is to have city council look at this framework and approve it to go into planning, which I feel like is where we would move into those objectives or actions that you want to see. So I'm just trying to kind of clarify what I think the motion is for tonight versus these next steps. I agree with Nate completely that need to be done, but I think that's in the planning stage if I'm not
I would agree with that,
misunderstanding.
yeah.
So when do you anticipate the next step? Not in 2 years, right? Not in 2 years.
No, well, we're going to be talking about it later this meeting, but we would hope it would be, soon. We just, that's yet to be determined as to what the time frame for that would be, but
Because I think that you did lay out which areas are responsible for those specific things in here. Maybe I misread it. So,
a lot of things are identified in there,
yeah. Okay.
I
And,
don't
and
agree.
you guys essentially can't move forward with much of anything. You need our approval to go through from here to set your goals. You need planning
No.
commissions.
they've already set their goals.
Or not, to start your working plan.
Yeah, so in order to move on to a plan, ultimately, there needs to be, this would be forwarded to council, and then it would be, the plan, the sustainability plan would be established as part of a master plan update.
Okay, sorry, I don't mean to keep going. Will you come back to us before the budget and stuff like that? Or is that what you're taking to council with this, a budget for it?
Well, I mean, ultimately, yeah, we would work with administration to figure out what a budget request would look like.
So we're going to send this to city council and you're going to attach a budget to it? Is that what's happening? Or the
Not
budget comes
immediately,
after?
but that would come after,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
And not exactly the way it stands now, because if I understand Mr. Hara's motion, which you seconded.
Yeah,
that-
I'm
that-
asking
that-
clarification on my.
That means that we're not going to be sending it on to council. We're going to postpone this. That's what
That
you're
is my,
dri-
that is my
that's what you're
request.
driving.
Yeah, that's my request.
We didn't vote on that yet, so that's why I'm
But
getting
that's-
clarification on my vote.
Yes, yes.
So the clarification on my vote would be, this is gonna, if we did send it forward,
Understand that? Do you still second that motion? Do you still?
you can second it and vote no on it.
You can, but you can also drop your second if you decide that you've changed your mind.
We can vote on his motion, I have no issue with that.
We can do that then.
I just wanted clarification if that's okay. Thank you.
It's the odd way of going about it.
I think
So
we
we're
do that
still
all the time.
discussing it, I think, now. So I just want to clarify something. Again, I don't want to adopt it today as is. I want it to become a more focused document where we truly have, honestly, the top three with hyper focus and hyper knowledge and hyper agreement that our pants are wide open on these three issues. There's nothing in our government right now that's trying to accomplish these goals. But we know that because we've checked the books. We know where our roles and responsibilities are, and these are the problems, right? I don't know that off the top of my head right now, so
Yeah. And I just want to say, I think that would be the part of the stage of the planning, right? That when you create the plan, that's when you get hyper-focused. And
but
I
this is
just,
a-
unless I'm misunderstanding, and maybe,
The scope of this document matches the scope that was called for in the original authorization of the committee. So going beyond that is moving into the planning phase, yeah.
I'll say it differently. There are some things on that document that you shared, Joe, that are beyond what I think we should focus on personally. So,
Sure.
with limited resources we have for us to adopt a document that says, yeah, council, planning commission, lockstep, everything we do is going to spend money and spend time on these 14 things. I'm not there yet, personally, especially if some of those things should already be being done another way and just aren't. And if we just discipline the right people to do their work, or help them do their work, or eliminate barriers, that would be better. This approach to putting a bunch of wishes onto one document and saying, we want this. You're not doing it through planning, you're not doing it through council, so let's do it through sustainability. I get the workaround strategy. I'm just not a fan of it if we are absolutely sure, if we're not absolutely sure that the traditional paths to ordinance would get it done. So I'm not in favor of adopting it as is in this current format for that reason. So I'm requesting, and again, I'll restate the motion. I move the Planning Commission direct the Sustainability Committee to engage in that further study and come back with those items so that we can review it with greater signal to noise ratio.
was there already a motion?
Is that a new motion
just-
or?
Just a restated motion.
Rewording of his original.
Okay.
Do you still?
We
'Cause-
never voted on the first one, so.
Right, they're not an acting part, they're a committee, they're not a board, so I don't think that they have an acting. Joshua, I see you shaking your head. Am I speaking
No, you're on the
correctly?
right path.
So in order for them to act in direction, they have to get approval from Planning Commission because they're a committee that was formed by us. So their action moves through us. I don't have an issue with moving this forward for that particular reason. And I think you guys did a great job. So none of this was meant to say anything otherwise. So I'll be voting no on your motion.
Even though you supported the motion, you.
Yes, I can do that. I would like to engage in conversation and ask questions.
But is your point that we cannot ask them to engage in those further studies?
Obviously, we can.
I think we
I
can.
just think that at this point, that's not where we are. When we do the plan, that's part of the plan phase. The framework is just setting out a path for developing a plan. That's all it's doing. So,
we could drop 6 of those items.
right,
Once
exactly. Once we're in
stage,
the
we-
planning stage, we don't necessarily have to carry all these items to fruition.
Yes.
All they're doing is they're providing a framework for how we would approach developing the plan.
I just to reiterate from what I understand is that, when we first came up with the Clawson Naturally Committee, the Sustainability Committee, the goal was to create just this framework as an initial step. And so the framework was just, collecting the feedback from residents, understanding what data is available, and how we go about creating a plan. So I feel like even in the framework, they went above and beyond to create those 14 goals that we want to see explored further in the planning stage to develop an actual plan, which says at this stage we had more input from the residents of Clawson, and then we can also at that time determine what other data is available, who would be responsible, and then come up with more of an action plan around those fewer items that we decide are more critical to focus on that dovetail into the master plan and other things that we're focused. I just think at this stage, I don't know if they're at a budget or anything like, they've kind of accomplished what I think they're initially set out to do. And so the next stage, to me, would be adopting it.
If we delayed it just a few weeks to put that matrix together, let's never mind the public comment request or the any other solicitation of feedback whatsoever. So leave it all alone. But just, because when you use the word framework, I'm very much there. I want to know the framework, but I don't see, when I read through it, and I did read through it, I didn't see anything that sought to integrate with our existing government. I saw an effort to kind of invent a new highway through it. And I don't know that that's your intention, but that's how it came across. And for that exact reason specifically, I was hoping to sort of delay the adoption until we understood it in that dimension. And you may vote no on it, that's fine. That's my
You're looking
request.
at putting this off for 2 weeks, having them come back in front of us and pitch again.
With that particular document that shows where the existing.
Changes.
I guess I don't understand what changes from today to then, even if we have that information.
Yeah, I think you'd have to be very specific in directing them as to what exactly you're looking for out of that.
Yeah.
And then it's going to set them back 2 weeks to come back to us for a vote. And at that point, we send it on to mayor and council for their blessing. I think, my opinion is it's not that tough of a document. It's mostly suggestive ideas. They're not changing ordinances or doing hardcore stuff. It's a lot of suggestive ideas, and I think it's very helpful ideas. I have no problem at all personally sending this on to mayor and council. That's where my position would. So I would be voting against your motion
Yeah,
also.
that's fine.
So I guess we have a motion on the floor now. I guess I'll have to take a roll call on this one first before we can get a new motion, correct? Okay, so if we all understand, if we're voting yes on this, that means we're going to postpone.
Correct.
So can I have roll call, please?
Mr. Harrell?
I vote yes.
Mr. Colbert?
No.
Mr. Cusero?
No.
Ms. Redmond?
No.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan?
No.
Motion fails. So I will entertain another motion.
I will make a motion to adopt and move to City Council the framework provided by the Sustainability Commission.
Motion. Do I have
Support.
Support. Motion and support.
Support.
Roll call, please.
That microphone died. Apologies for that. Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Mr. Harrell?
No.
Mr. Colbert?
Yes.
Mr. Cusero?
Yes.
Ms. Redmond?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
No.
Motion carries.
Motion carries. So this will be passed upon from us up to the council for their having a look at it. Thank you, and that was a pretty strenuous one. We got through sustainability. Now we'll move on to the agenda item number 8, zoning ordinance discussion, short-term rentals. I believe Mr. Tangieri will talk us through this.
So before I get into this one thing I will note is that Mr. Nushai had intended to be here. However, he got sick. So
Which
he
one?
could not be here. Rennis, the attorney.
Okay.
I don't know about Laurent. He obviously can't be here either.
came up.
But yes, so Rennis was planning to be here. However, he did get sick. That doesn't necessarily mean we can't discuss it tonight. But I just did want to let you know that he had intended to be here, but he was not able to.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Did he leave specific comments or anything that he wanted to address?
He did not transmit any specific comments, no. So, building on the discussion we had last time, and I understand we have a member who was not here last time because he was appointed in the meantime. We did begin discussing short-term rentals, often referred to as Airbnbs or VRBOs, after the companies that enable peer-to-peer rental of dwelling units. And the city did adopt a short-term rental ordinance. We've included the full text of that ordinance in the packet again. And what we're now being asked to do is look at potential zoning regulations for short-term rentals that would work hand in hand with the other ordinance. So the other ordinance really deals primarily with licensing and permitting for these units and how that works. And then in the zoning ordinance, we would do a few things. We could talk about some of the land use and externality issues of these units, but we also can identify where these units might be permitted. So based on the discussion that we had last time, we put a little bit of language in here and then a couple of other issues to consider. That's how the memo is structured. So we look at the language. We've defined short-term rental for the zoning ordinance the same way it's defined in the short-term rental ordinance because we want them to match. So we've imported that other ordinance's definition into the zoning ordinance. And that way, anytime you see the term short-term rental in the zoning ordinance, we know what it means. Now, when we looked at regulations for short-term rentals, we would look at having a section in Article 4 of the zoning ordinance that included some standards. And one of those was a standard for posting in a clearly visible location in the unit itself. Just notice of some of the laws that apply in the city to these units, and just reminders that you are located in a residential neighborhood and neighbors might not be vacationing, and that neighboring property owners or tenants can contact the local agent, which is established in the other ordinance, and local police to report issues. So essentially what it does is, from an enforcement standpoint, that gives us the chance to say, look, you were notified that the city has a nuisances ordinance and that there's a public peace ordinance and a solid waste ordinance, but you still left some trash on the front lawn. And that's why you're being spoken to by a police officer right now. It really is just an enforcement aid. We have a requirement for accommodating parking on site in here. That's something that's not addressed in the other ordinance. And it speaks to how many vehicles per occupancy load we'd be looking to accommodate on the site. And then referring to the short-term rental unit ordinance itself. Now, the next topic here, other issues to consider, first addresses districts, and then it has a couple of thoughts on aggregation, which are two things that we talked about last time, but did not settle on any language for. So addressing districts first, we have 7 total districts that permit residential use of some sort. And those are R1 and R2, which is our detached single-family districts. That's where most of our houses are. We have RM1, which is a multifamily district. We have RM2, which is also a multifamily district. However, there's only one RM2 parcel in the entire city, and that's Clausen Manor, the senior tower. So I just put it right in the memo. We wouldn't recommend permitting short-term rentals in the senior tower district. That just doesn't make any sense. So we're going to take that one off the table, and we're left with 6 others. The other 3 are the core residential, which permits detached and attached single family. So you could have like townhomes there. The city center, which permits multifamily as part of a mixed-use development, and the CMD, Central Mixed Use District, which also permits multifamily as part of a mixed-use development. So what I'd like to try to do is establish a list of districts where we feel it's appropriate to permit a short-term rental, and then strike the other districts from the list so that we would know these are the districts we're going to amend. So R1 and R2, those are our primary detached single-family districts. Those are also the districts where all the units that we are aware of that we have now are located. So most likely, we would make short-term rentals a permitted use in those districts. They are the most likely location for such a unit. Now, in the multifamily district, the RM1, because we're not talking about RM2, you have your small apartment buildings, generally speaking. And the question there is, would we allow one of those units to be used as a short-term rental? Now, all of those buildings are going to have their owners. They're also all going to have their tenants, and their tenants are going to be bound by rental agreements. So in most of those complexes, tenants probably would not be able to make their unit that they're renting into a short-term rental because they would be prohibited from a sublet type situation by their rental contract. However, the owner of the complex could decide, all right, I've got 52 units. I'm going to make 2 of them short-term rentals and the rest of them will just be standard rentals. So that's something to consider. And then in the CR, CC, and CMD, which is the center of our city, we do have, multifamily units in the CC and CMD, and then the core residential district, which is kind of around the fringe of the downtown, is mostly detached single-family homes right now. Could potentially have some attached, like duplex or townhome development in the future. So we want to be thinking about those as well. As if you have any questions or thoughts on that, I'll entertain them at this time.
So the only thing that I would like to know is, are you asking us to consider purely the zones that would be permissible, or is this an opportunity of us to express or engineer other constraints to minimize damage to our neighbors?
Well, we can do both of those things tonight. If you have any other things that you think should be considered in terms of standards for these units, yeah, absolutely. You can certainly bring those up. But I would like to establish the districts tonight.
Joe, with the RM2, I know it's referenced as a senior tower, but we're not restrictive to seniors there, right?
No, the district itself is not restricted
But no,
to seniors.
even the building itself, that's a that's I don't want to say low income. What's the appropriate way of saying
Well,
it?
I mean, it's HUD housing.
I don't picture them, the building owners, in any way opening a.
No.
I'm just asking for clarification. So it's not only a senior living facility, any age can live there, correct? Because when you say senior living, it's 55 or whatever and older.
Yeah.
But it's not a senior living facility, right? Anymore, I believe?
I'm
There used to
not.
be handicapped people living there.
Yeah.
That were younger.
Yeah, I'm not sure with Clausen.
Nick,
with the new
didn't we
companies
say
taking
that
over.
was like not so much senior living anymore? It was kind of like available to anyone that meets a low income threshold?
All right, we're back on, I think. So the new company that purchased that building, that's doing the renovations now, it's definitely still catered towards more a senior population, but they do encourage, low-income housing as well. I don't want to say assisted living in like the true sense where they're disabled or anything, but it's housing for people that are in more of a need than, a young married couple, something like that.
Right, and do they have a certain percentage per HUD that they have to be of those units?
I imagine they do. I don't know that off the top of my head, though.
Yeah, HUD,
Okay.
HUD does have standards for that. I don't know I have no idea what the standard is.
Okay.
But
I mean, because if they only need 50%, then they really could do Airbnbs in there, potentially.
So the current owner of that property, they would not be able to because
Okay.
they're funded through HUD. I think they
Yeah.
just got a pretty large grant, and they are locked into serving
Yeah,
those type of residents. So,
Right.
100%, 100%
Yes.
of those units?
yeah,
Oh,
they
okay.
don't have an option to pursue other types of business in their facilities,
Yeah, there's too
basically.
much
Okay.
control on them that they wouldn't be
Yeah.
able to pull that off.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I have a whole page of things that if we were to even consider putting it in residential, that I just don't think that there are close to enough, the way it is written, close to enough things here to,
Well, one thing I was trying to avoid was overlap with the other ordinance, which does have some standards of its own too, so.
which were.
The short-term rental ordinance.
Oh, yeah, but I mean, they don't, in terms of, like you said, this is more of a registration, and there's not a whole lot in terms of inspection. Like, we don't, people that are visiting at a very transient way. We're not even asking, do you have a fire extinguisher? Like, is the electrical up to code? Like, there's nobody actually walking inside of any of these units and I get that any homeowner can do that, but when you have a transient use, the wear and tear happens so much faster. There's just not an eye on the condition of the home and the safety of the home. And the way it's written, I just don't see that it serves our residential areas.
So inspections and safety would be addressed in the general ordinance. That's not something that's addressed by zoning. So if you do have suggestions to that effect, certainly I'm interested in them.
Well, I've given them many times. Not to you, Joe.
But yeah, those are things that would be addressed in the general ordinance, so.
Yeah, so the inspection is exterior only.
Right.
There's no interior inspection. One inspection every 2 years is not, in my opinion, well-served on a transient use. If you have, I get in a rental home, going there every 2 years, it's not receiving the wear and tear that a transient use receives. I also don't think that there's an enforcement mechanism outside of the police that I would feel like if my neighbor was an Airbnb and I had my kids playing in the backyard, I would feel great about being able to report and have enforcement without having it fall down the line of whose responsibility it is and never actually holding them accountable. And that's just my opinion.
Can I interrupt for just a second?
Sure.
And I don't want to derail, because I think she's got a lot of great input. But just in consideration of time, I'm trying to understand, do we have control? I mean, my interpretation was city council is more in charge of the ordinance and all of that. What is our core role here on the planning commission? Because I agree that those are all critical, important things. My understanding is a lot of that is a different governing.
Can I say I preface this with, as of right now, I don't feel like this has the components that I would feel comfortable with it in residential. So this is me saying I don't, as zoning, don't want it in
Current
residential.
ordinance,
Yeah.
okay.
And I was just giving examples of why. So
Okay.
I'm not
I
trying to
understand. I just
change
wanna
the
make sure-
ordinance at all.
Just don't, because
Yeah.
I know we can get really off the rails,
Right.
because this is a very passionate topic and it's important.
Right.
Yeah.
Keeping in mind too that there is no specified district for it now, so it's wherever there's residential, it's available because of the way this ordinance has been adopted. So if we're not establishing which districts it's permitted in, then it's permitted in all these districts that have been listed here.
Is there an overwhelming amount of people that want Airbnbs? So I think we're kind of
Not here.
leaving this discussion, and we're spending a lot of time on this.
If I may, I do regularly check the website since the website is an Airbnb in Verbo since this ordinance was approved in December, and there's never more than 3 or 4 that are out there.
Generally speaking, yeah.
I mean, do we really need to have a section of these dwellings
We're just
that people want to do?
we just try to get ahead of it and be prepared.
Right.
I mean,
And I guess
Is it
and
really-
I agree. I think we should have some discussion about residential uses in those.
I don't want it in my house or in my neighborhood.
Well, I understand, and I
My
think
street.
for me personally, I mean, aggregation's a much bigger area of concern.
Let's fix the streets and stuff and not worry about.
Right, so, I mean, but I do think it's important to have this in place. The market changes. Right now, Airbnbs are kind of they're kind of falling out, right? COVID was the height, but we're writing ordinances not for just right now, but for future as well. So I think it's worth at least coming to terms on which zoning places. Like, are we all kind of in agreement that residential is not something we're all feeling, or
Yeah, so
should I
let's
talk
make
more?
it
No.
BRD2, okay?
PRD2.
I mean, you think I'm joking, but I'm not, okay? Because here's my observation here. No one on this, so it seems, is really excited about promoting short-term rentals next door to their homes. And at the moment, there is no ordinance that even remotely tries to govern it. Inspections, minimum standards, minimum stay standards, how many different shell companies to LLCs can operate them that will never be able to hold accountable later. These are all things that the rest of the world has figured out the hard way. So at the moment, we are exposed tremendously. Every district in Clawson can be pilfered this way as it stands right now. Maybe council will come up with ordinances to control this in the future. Maybe they won't. But at the moment, if I understand correctly, Joe, we can make the best place for them BRD2.
We don't allow residential.
A court
or-
would interpret that as a zone out. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, I mean,
Be too limiting.
Yeah,
Because you don't even allow
you're
it there.
effectively prohibiting the use,
yeah.
and that's not something that
Well,
we're permitted to do
in-
under state law.
and I do, the woman that was here before, there are things that they didn't address. Again, I know we're not trying to rewrite their ordinance, but the woman that, she's essentially, I don't even know if you consider that Airbnb, not according to our definition,
It's
right?
kind of
We
like a
decided that.
serial roommate situation that she's got
Right,
going
like,
on.
that's not an issue because you have someone that's a responsible
She's
body for
living-
that home, in the home.
Living in the home.
We can go to, hey neighbor, that guy last night was not cool, like whatever. So I don't want to like prohibit her. And so can we grandfather, since there doesn't seem to be, I mean, I don't know if there's an issue with the ones that are standing. We have heard comments prior. All of us received the email from residents. What can we do about the 4 that exist?
Well, so a couple things when it comes to, we'll just use the word grandfathering, even though when it comes to zoning, it's not really the right word. So zoning cannot be retroactively enforced. So any unit, any short-term rental that's been established prior to us adopting regulations would be a non-conforming use. Now, adopting a general ordinance to govern short-term rentals and the licensing and all that for them allows the city to approach those uses that are already existing, that are non-conforming under zoning, and say, look, you have to become part of our licensing and registration scheme. Because general ordinances can be enforced on existing uses. So that's part of the reason that we've got like a dual approach here, where this has been adopted and now we're looking at the zoning aspect of it.
The only thing that's been adopted is the registry, right?
The thing that's been adopted is this ordinance that we included in your packet here, the short-term rental, it's ordinance number 34-354, short-term rental units. And what it does is it, well, like any good ordinance, it defines terms. It provides some findings as a basis for the adoption of the ordinance. And then it has standards. So it establishes a fee structure. It establishes the forms by which you would register these units. It establishes the licensing and registration scheme. It sets some regulations. So there's a list of 4 regulations in there that requires a designated contact person and how they can be reached. It establishes that the dwelling unit has to meet residential building, health department, nuisance and safety codes. It establishes quiet hours, and it also prohibits the use of fireworks on one of these properties. It establishes maximum occupancy, and it establishes a revocation procedure for the license and registration. And it has some things about violations and other things as well. So the typical stuff like severability and repeal clauses and all that stuff is also in there. But that's what that ordinance does. And what this zoning aspect of it would do is supplement that for the future so that we're identifying districts where it would be permitted. And it doesn't have to be a principally permitted use either. It could potentially be a special land use. That might be a little clumsy, but nevertheless, you could choose to go in that direction. And then we've got a couple little extra standards that we put on it here. And then I've got the aggregation discussion at the bottom as well. So for the purposes of tonight, given that we don't have our attorney here, I think focusing on the zoning aspect of it is probably the best thing to do, because I can't really do anything about the general ordinance. But really, it's the districts and the aggregation conversation that, that I think is the meat of our discussion tonight. Where and how many of these units? Now, we at this point don't have a critical mass problem like, say, South Haven does, or numerous communities in California or Florida do. But like you say, market conditions change, and it could always become an issue. So I've provided kind of a 3-option list of aggregation management tools that I've discovered in other ordinances about for short-term rentals. And they could work together. You wouldn't necessarily be sticking with one. So an overall cap on the number of units available in the city. So you have, let's say we've identified that we have about maybe 5 or 6 of these units that at some point in the year are being rented out. And usually it's about 3 or 4 at a time, because they're not necessarily all rented out for the whole year. So you might establish that there is a 6-unit cap for the first year. And if you reach the 6-unit cap in registration, you might have a trigger for, after 2 years at 6, we add a 7th or something like that. But you have an overall cap so that you don't get rapid multiplication. If you permitted them in multifamily districts, you might look at permitting no more than 1 unit per number of units on site, like a unit per 20 or something, or 1 unit in a complex, no matter what its size is. And then if we permitted them in single-family districts, you could look at potentially area-based limits or a distance standard. Oxnard, California has kind of a nice standard where they identify neighborhoods. They actually have a map of Oxnard, and it's this neighborhood, and their neighborhoods actually have like names. But we could do it however we felt appropriate. You just identify, here's area 1, here's area 2, here's area 3, here's area 4, and there can be no more than 2 or 3 units in an area, or no more than X% of the units in an area could be these short-term rentals. So that might be 1% or something. And if you've got 200 units in that area, then there's a maximum of 2. And if there's 300 units in another area, there's a maximum of 3. So those are all ways that you can control aggregation. Now, you might choose just not to permit it in multifamily districts. Well, you don't need an aggregation standard for a multifamily district at that point. But those are the approaches that we can take. And then again, we've got our list of districts that we can deal with.
I mean, it feels like this body would just prefer to say no in all of the zones.
Sound like it's possible to do that, right?
Yeah.
Is that what you said?
So we want to make it difficult, I think, for anyone to get a yes, right?
Well, and I
I
think
would
I'm
kind of
okay with
advise
them.
against saying that, because there is some potential for legal recourse.
Right,
If we
exactly.
mention things like that,
Yeah.
I think everyone kind of has the same feel of what we're trying to do here,
Yeah.
but just be careful with how you word some of those.
Yeah, I think.
I'm just,
There is a very
Let me-
reasonable legal basis, though, to control and mitigate, and if I would responsibly discourage damaging policies and ordinances that invite abuse, invite
Yeah.
problems. I'm struggling to see if zoning is the strong way to do that, or if the real ordinance that was rushed through by council recently is the better tool. There are real things you can do with minimum stays, right? Not 24 hours, but perhaps 1 month minimums. There are many communities I've heard of in Florida that do that to instill a commitment. Someone's got to commit to being there for that long, not years, not even a year, but not a day.
I think the
right?
definition was 30 days or less, though.
Yeah.
Right,
then-
that's what
But you
defines
could
it.
have more than a 2-day minimum or something,
We
of
could,
course.
we could have minimums, right?
Yeah.
We could require minimums, and
Yeah.
we could have specific ordinances that take away lessons learned from other communities that have had problems with enforcement because of the shell companies and the LLCs. So I hear what you're saying, Joe, that there's two ways to skin this cat. One way is to try to, put a pin on the map and say here and not here. I'm just not sure I'm finding a compelling reason that that's the smart way to solve the problem. And please don't misunderstand, I'm not discouraging what you say. I think you said it kind of honestly. But I agree with you, Nick, that if we can't just, BRD2 it, as was said, right?
Well, and I think that there are, and I said this at city council when we were talking about it as well, and I'm not on city council, obviously, but I just came as a, audience member. But in city center, there's a lot more action. There's a lot more of a transient coming and going within the restaurants, where it's not going to affect neighbors in the way that a residential area might affect. There's comings and goings. Same with a multifamily. I've lived in many apartments. You get used to the noise, you get used to the comings and going. So it's not a big of a disruption, and I'm not trying to just off-put it there. But I feel like there's particular areas within our zoning map that it works where it's less disruptive and it can work and function. And when it's in a city center, there's more eyes on the commercial aspect of things that way we can see that, codes are being applied in other ways, in my opinion, right? You got people going through and making sure codes are up to date, at least if it's a mixed use. So I don't think that I'm, at least me, saying zone them out, but, and I know we're not saying that at all. But I do think that there are places where we can kind of fit those
Yeah.
in a way that,
And to add to your comments, I mean, to play devil's advocate, I don't think that all short-term rentals are bad. I mean, I have my own in northern Michigan, and I think when people think of short-term rentals, they tend to think of, a one-night stay where, anybody can come in and be super disruptive. I think there's a lot of good things, it brings new members into our community to check out the city. I know my neighbor had to use one for, while his house was being renovated for a small period of time, to get out, but not, stay at a hotel and still be in the city. There's definitely uses, and to your point, I agree, there's a lot we want to protect in the residential areas, but there are other zoned areas where it may make more sense. So just wanted to kind of agree with your comments, I guess, there.
Well, could we do this? We're supposed to be having a public hearing for the BRD1 medical establishment usage, right?
Yeah, that'll be next meeting because of the postponement from last time.
Okay, so can we do 2 in 1? Can we invite people from, if I hear you correctly, Aaron, CC and CMD?
I mean, are you asking me, are those the only zones that I feel like they're appropriate for? I would even entertain a very low density in a multifamily. I wouldn't obviously want that to be very disruptive, but I'm open to discussion about it. And, the core residential is kind of going to be more of a higher density, higher trafficked, so I'd be open to discussion about those other areas as well.
I agree that I would like more public opinion. I maybe, if it is a general public or if there's something else we could do to understand. Because, I don't want to say that just because you live in a multifamily, you're okay with it, right? To
Right.
your point. So I would love
Yeah.
the perspective of somebody that currently lives there and how they feel about it before we go and make decisions for the whole community.
The argument is that in the CC and the CMD, there's already a lot of transient activity, right? So, but.
So we're all
I'm not-
good on those ones, we just want to know about.
I'm not saying that. I'm not even sure I would make this motion. I'm just saying if that's a path, we can discuss that. But I'm very uncomfortable picking a zone without public comment.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I agree with
Okay.
that comment, yeah.
And we don't have to, we're not asking, you're not asking for a motion at all, right?
No,
Yeah.
we're only for
This was a
discussion this
discussion
evening.
item tonight, so there's.
The ordinance
we're not
itself,
anywhere near a motion.
short-term rental units, has this been through the council twice now?
Yeah, it's adopted.
So it's adopted ordinance. So all we're doing now is we're adding on to it.
You're adding on to what's
we're
been
tweaking it.
adopted.
Well,
Yeah, anything we
and-
do in the zoning ordinance will be a companion to that ordinance.
To be fair,
yeah.
city council was heavily dependent when they adopted it on us in us putting, I think as, I can't think of his name right now. I don't know, apologize. But adding a little bit more teeth into it because they knew that it didn't have as much substance as many may have liked.
I'm sure down the line, if we add more to it, they will adapt to it. They will accept it.
Yeah,
Well, I think we're all on the
yes. I
same
think they're
page
looking for
there.
overall feedback as well, too,
But
on
tonight-
things
tonight's only
outside our
discussion.
purview.
We're not going to vote on this at all. We're just,
Right. So I mean, I think just given the absence of our attorney tonight and some of the fact that some of the comments are things that I think he should be responding to, perhaps it would make sense to postpone this for now and move on, and we can come back to it next time. And we can discuss internally how we're going to move forward on it.
you got some discussion out of it, so. Okay, if we move on, we'll move on to agenda item number 9, which is the master plan discussion.
And before I get going on this, I don't want to discredit your comments by any means. I'm just trying to make sure we're not putting ourselves out there for any liability. And then, Ms. Redmond, I know that you made some comments about enforcement. And so when it comes to short-term rentals, regular rentals, or just another neighbor you may not like, if there are code issues, you can definitely pass those on to the staff here at City Hall or the police department, depending on the hour of the day, and we'll investigate that. And if it's a short-term rental, we'll do whatever we can to get in contact with the actual property owner. Obviously, that doesn't address the concerns that you're having right now, but for people watching that want to know, there are still platforms to file code complaints.
Yeah, but we don't know them, right? We wouldn't know
That's
about the
fair.
code complaint, right?
As in the planning commission,
Or as your neighbor or anybody, because we're
Well-
not doing an interior inspection.
Well, it would external. I was referring to external, but internal complaints. I mean, in theory, it could come from a tenant that rented it out. But you're not wrong with that sentiment.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
So you're not wrong with.
Oh, okay. I
we're
thought you
not
said I'm
aware
not
of-
relevant. I'm like, well,
No,
that
no,
was rude.
wrong.
No.
I'm sorry. No, I
Okay.
apologize.
No, thank you. Thanks, Nick.
Yeah.
And Nick, by difficult, what I'm saying is, just like Commissioner Redmond just said, right? We're not even requiring an inspection of the home, and we're allowing them to rent out to people that could be at risk. I'm not real uncomfortable with that.
Without knowing what type of insurance they even, I mean, I guess,
I'm just,
right?
I'm just uncomfortable with
Yeah,
that.
of course.
Yeah.
And,
So they
and
need
I.
to be committed, if they're gonna do this, then they need to be committed to creating a safe environment and, committed to being a good community member, right?
Yeah, of course. And I think we'll work into that, and I think that'll come up when we do have our attorney here. But I just wanted to address a couple comments that we had during the last discussion. So moving on, I know everyone's been looking forward to this conversation again. So I'm gonna probably just go through the memo that I provided in the packet and then touch on a couple of the points there, and then go through the attached assessment tool. And then during that conversation, just intended to be open-ended, and please provide your feedback as we're moving forward through that. So in summary, the memo I provided you basically is just outlining what the attached tool is. And it is intended to be a collaborative tool between the Planning Commission, city staff, and other relevant stakeholders to provide feedback on the goals in the master plan. This was developed over the last couple weeks with Joe Tangari and the city manager, Joe Raker, who at the last meeting provided you guys an update on the background when he was interviewing and when he reviewed the master plan at the time, kind of what his goal was. And so this is what was developed based on that. So if you move forward to, when looking at the assessment tool, you'll see that there's 4 different color options that can be had. And so red indicates no progress, it's no longer relevant or unattainable. Orange indicates that there has been interest and discussion, but no substantive progress has been made. Yellow indicates progress is underway with more to be done, and green indicates that that goal has been accomplished. And again, that's obviously up for interpretation. There were 2 provided in there. It was one done by the administration, Joe and myself, and then we just provided Giffords' comments in there, and Joe also graded each goal himself too. So it's going to vary based on interpretation. Again, it's open-ended, a draft, just like I said, used to gauge where we are at this moment of time. So one of the things that we kind of agreed on was when we were going through this is a lot of these goals seem very ambiguous and they're kind of hard to gauge. And so if we revert back to the sustainability framework, we can see that each one of the goals in there, they had a couple pages on each document, explained, who does what, how it's affected, some information, data. And I think moving to maybe some direction like that, to have some more concrete background on each goal, could be beneficial, instead of just having a very broad sentence, and then, that's what we refer to as the goal. The last master plan was done by a different provider, and now Giffords is here working with us, and, they do things differently, so I think that we'll be able to achieve a little bit more directness with some of our goals and objectives that we have. So on the second page of the memo, we developed 7 items in there, no particular order, of conversation points that the Planning Commission has had, items that have been brought up to the city administration, and then just general things developers, other entities, stakeholders have shared with us. And so those 7 items are infrastructure needs to be included in the master plan. Or that should be the school district site development at Shulman Baker, parking, the sustainability framework, expanded mixed use development in certain districts, the reevaluation of the BRD districts and West 14-mile corridors, and then the downtown development master plan, which is also being reviewed at this time. So those 7 items are just something we pulled together from conversations we've had with you guys over the past couple of years, ourselves. Again, open-ended, can be edited, changed based on, your guys' feedback tonight, but I think we characterize a number of things that we've gone over up until this point. Yeah.
Are you able to put it up there, or just so people, like people at home can see it when you do that, right, or no?
I don't know if we can.
No?
In the
Does that
recording?
broadcast to like?
If I share my
YouTube?
screen, it can. I'm
Oh.
not in the meeting right now, but I can do that.
Oh, okay, I wasn't sure if that'd be helpful. I don't even, does
I
anybody
can
watch
definitely
this?
do that. So
Okay.
when I'm getting that up there, and before we get into the assessment tool, does anybody have any comments on that so far?
Well, I do. I'm very grateful for this, and it's a promise made by your department to put it into a format of red, green, and yellow, basically, what progress has been made and maybe where has progress not been made. This was not on my radar screen as an objective 2 months ago, and certainly not 12 months ago. But what has been on my mind for the last 14 months is that nowhere in our master plan, as of the last iteration, were our sewers, water mains, or roads really comprehended. And I don't believe it's a false statement to say that none of these other goals, revitalizing the DDA or, promoting business or any of these things are going to be achievable if we do not have a scenario where everybody in Clawson can flush their toilet and the stuff goes down and not back up. It will not matter how our sidewalks are. It will not matter how our parks are. It will not matter if everybody has the same type of awnings in downtown, if that doesn't happen. And so I'm encouraging us to keep our mind on the fact that the missing element of the master plan is an alternative to the fix-as-fail strategy that we currently employ desperately to do so. And then every time we appropriate funds through CIP going forward, we just have to kind of believe, make believe that those funds are in concurrence and in harmony with the master plan. They're not right now. They could be, right? And they should be, but at the moment they aren't. All I was trying to accomplish for the last 14 months was to get another goal established, quite frankly, in the beginning of all of these, that said we want to, over the period of some time, overhaul our infrastructure so that we can look forward to a time when we don't have to worry about it. And, Ms. Redmond, you brought up earlier that it's not that simple, and it's somewhat, improbable that we will be able to control the combined sewer system. There are parts of that, of course, are correct, but we're in this situation because multiple elements and collaborations with our downstream partners have resulted in the it's a situation where that hasn't been resolved. I think if we have the goal that our future generations never have to worry about predictable flooding scenarios, predictable rain scenarios, not overwhelming our sanitary lines, I think that's an achievable goal. I truly believe that. Some of the data isn't there to drive it right now, flow sensors to prove who contributed, where was the blockage, if there was a blockage. There's a lot of assumption and belief and not a lot of data. So I think those things can be happening. So in closing, I just was hoping to come out of this with a document from Joe or yourself, a one-paragraph sentence that goes to council.
Here.
It is the first line, and they suggest adding to the new master plan. So I agree. I think your comments are dead on, and I think that from what I can see, the summary, the recommendation to update the master plan, infrastructure is one of the first things we need to add. And I think they did. I mean, I don't want to speak for them. I think they took your comments into consideration last time, and I agree. I'm on page 74 of 89. I know we have a very long packet this time, and I just thought that that was helpful that they did summarize, I think, the long conversations we had last time around, which topics need to be included in the updated master plans should we decide to go forward and update our master plan, right?
Very well.
Do you see where he's talking about it?
Yeah, be more specific with the importance of infrastructure, water,
Yeah.
sewers.
Yeah.
So I think that is a main goal. So we want to definitely, I feel like this body agrees we need to update the master plan, and that is a key addition.
Yeah.
And that is definitely what we're trying to illustrate here, and just get it down on paper. And this is a step forward to getting the council's approval, and then we'll come back and really get into the weeds of everything else. And this is going to be a document that we expand on, grow on based on your comments tonight. But with infrastructure and I don't want to say, with our issues with infrastructure that we're having, stating it in the master plan like we're talking about now is definitely going to help in the future, but putting it in the master plan isn't going to get new concrete down. What will is corresponding it with the CIP, but even that doesn't get it done because we've got millions and millions of dollars to do, and so that's going to take a larger effort, likely a millage, something of that nature, to cover that cost. And so to get to that point, to prove to the residents that, hey, we need to have a millage, illustrating like the sentiment of wanting to improve our infrastructure starts in the master plan, but it builds to that final end goal of truly updating the infrastructure.
Yeah. If I was to ask for an inclusion of the word prioritization in that bullet point, so that there was specificity as a goal, right? As a goal, what first, what second, what third, is that harmful?
What goal is that again? I'm sorry.
To have a, let me
The ones that you're adding to it, the
Okay, the new
infrastructure
ones.
one,
Okay.
to say prioritize infrastructure, he wanted to add, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is I appreciate the fact that this is there. Be more specific about the importance of infrastructure, yeah. But do you envision that the master plan's goal of doing that would be so detailed as to have some kind of prioritization plan? This area first, this area second, this area third? Or would it just be some vague thing that it's important? If you didn't know it before, you know it now.
I think it would probably fall somewhere in between, because to have a very specific, detail-oriented plan in there, then we're kind of straying from what the intent of a master plan is. So by meeting you somewhere in the middle, developing the plan, that would be part of the goal, a sub-goal of updating the infrastructure.
I think establishing assessment criteria and an assessment schedule is certainly something that you could get into into some very high level of it's late.
Specificity.
A high level of specificity on, and then that would set you up to create. So you would establish a responsible party for maintaining the prioritization list with the understanding that priorities that are set now might change in the future based on events that happen in the future.
Well, I'm very satisfied with this. At any rate, I think it's going to go to council, right? We're going to delegate that to you if we so move it today, and it'll go to council for their blessing and then back to us, right? Is that what would happen?
If that's the way the commission votes, then yeah.
The council, you mean?
Well-
Yeah, right, the commission.
Yes, yes, yes.
We don't open it up for the public to take a look at it?
At this point,
Yeah,
like it'll be down the road when we're reviewing the master plan, but not now, no.
not right now. Okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is just the initial steps, but once we, get to the point of reviewing our master plan, if that's the direction the council decides to go, there will be many opportunities for the public to engage in, the future and vision of Clawson.
So when you're sending it on, oh, I'm sorry, were you trying to speak? Are you going to include, you want to put these within, like, are you going to present it to them like this, like how you give it to us? And then like put these parts in it? Or is that?
So, we can definitely make that information public. Mm-hmm.
Or I meant to council for us to like send it off.
And that was one thing I wanted to ask you guys as well. So with the recommendation to council, do you want, those items that I presented tonight in there as part of the request? Like, these are some of the items we're hoping to address more. Is that too specific? I think by outlining a couple of specific items, you give the council reasons, they just don't want to review the master plan to review the master plan. They want to review the master plan so we can address infrastructure, parking, and our certain zoning districts. Give them some context of why, we've talked about what's going on in the BRD2 district with medical offices. BRD1, we've looked at the drive-through and restaurants. Instead of planning to do that as they come up, we can set a plan that it is enabled through the master plan to go and review each district one at a time.
I think it's important. I think you guys did a lot of good work here. For me personally, going through and seeing what has been done and what has not been done over the past 5 years, it's good to have a little bit of an assessment of, okay, so how do we feel? Did we accomplish this goal? Can we drop it and focus on a different goal, like infrastructure? And so I think you captured our comments of what we believe needs to be added, and then with your assessment tool, you can see potentially what still needs to be addressed and focused on, what can be dropped. I think this is all helpful information to send along to City Council so they can see the reasoning behind our hopeful decision to review the master plan. So I'm in support of including this.
Thank you.
Comment, because I want to talk again. Don't you have a comment? Oh, I thought you did.
I was just
Oh.
moving the mic.
Oh, you were? I thought you were raising your hand. I just want to make sure I don't talk again before you talk. So, like, within these, there were a few that I kind of was like, all right, well, and I don't want to get too lost, right? Because should I go into detail? Probably not. I don't know. But, in terms of, like, the DDA and stuff, there were, I don't know the exact comments, but, like, I'm hoping that this was an effort to say that there should be more communication working with the DDA, like, because when it talked about it, like the DDA obviously is their own kind of entity, right? We don't have privy to their, and we've referenced it many times when talking about adding residential or, housing downtown. Like, well, what about the parking? Well, what about the, like it would be helpful to have some type of communication between us and the DDA so that, the more that we can work together, I think that was goal 2. And, in terms of one of the goals you guys said that we didn't address, and I guess it's probably not that big of a deal, but I do think that we have considered allowing housing in a lot more areas than what was referenced here, with Main and Roth, and on Rochester Road and in the city center. I think we've kind of expounded upon that a little bit more than we were kind of given credit for anyway. This has been done in downtown area, but not been studies elsewhere. So I don't know what it means by studies elsewhere.
I I believe that was reference to parking, so the DDA did a
Oh, the
parking study
parking. Oh, okay.
in 2020.
That was more for parking?
Yes.
Oh, okay, I thought it was talking about residential, well, okay, so it said residential development, but it didn't identify parking in the, but that was just
Well,
reference to
I think
parking?
one thing we have talked about too is the parking that is referenced to residential and developments and the DDA and of course the city as a whole is, are our parking requirements too stringent? And I was just referencing the DDA parking study as, something that was done.
Oh, okay, I guess I misread that then. Okay, cool. And then also, I know we talked a little bit about schools in here. Obviously, I feel like Planning Commission was a big part of the talk at the beginning. I would like to, I see this probably every meeting, but that we talk about it. I'd like to stay on a pulse in some way of just knowing what's going on there, at least. If you're gonna form a committee, call somebody from planning or something, maybe, or let us know when we can attend any type of meetings. And then the senior center, are we trying to address that at all in our future master plan, or?
Well, I think it should be addressed in the master plan, but I think what the planning commission can address is kind of limited because it's not necessarily falls under the purview of the planning commission.
If it's gonna be sold, it doesn't? It's all the city council and stuff? Like,
Sold.
I know they were talking about, I'm not trying to put any info out there, right? But I know that they were gonna do a study on the condition of the building and figure out those kinds of things with the building at one point in time.
I think that would just be best stated as trying to best use our resources to serve our aging
Okay.
community. I mean, something along that line.
Okay, and we don't wanna call out anything about losing baseball, basketball courts, all those things with the Shelton schools.
And it's something when we get into the specific details of each goals, I mean, obviously, we've got a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity as a landlocked community to, develop a site in the middle of our town. And so to talk about things of, units, green space is going to be important in this next master plan. But, it's not going to happen for a couple years once the schools really start to talk about it too. And I think that's where a relationship was kind of fractured a little bit, is because we were moving a little faster than they intended. But just kind of having some broad goals, realizing that it's probably going to be something we need to address in this next master plan in the next five years roughly. Having some goals strictly stated for, those properties.
Okay, that's all I had, but I like it. Thank you for making it so concise for us. Yeah, it looks good.
Any further discussion on master plan? Good enough?
Yeah, I'm good unless anyone else has any questions.
Okay. I guess we'll move on to agenda item number 10, other business.
Do we need to make a motion
Do we
to
need to
move this
motion
to
it
city
to
council?
to take it to council?
No, it's only a discussion tonight.
Oh, it is. Oh.
Okay.
Yeah, there was no furthering it.
Yeah, if.
Yeah, what would be the holdup at this point? I would say that we want to, as a body, it seems like we agree, we want to review the master
We
plan.
we have an outstanding, motion that was approved for you to do this, I think,
Oh, do we? To take it?
months ago, or we.
Right, so previously, the administration asked us to pause until they could do this assessment for us, so that we can make an informed decision on, do we want to review the master plan, or make our recommendation that we would like to review the master plan to city council, I think is where we left off. So I think it would do us a lot of good to make a motion tonight and say, maybe we want to make a recommendation as planning commission to move this to.
You're halfway there,
council?
Josh.
Yeah.
Am I saying?
Go for it.
Okay, then yes, that would be my motion. If you want me to restate it for clarity, I can, but I just want to leave this meeting making sure that we accomplish that.
Yeah, yeah.
Nate will clear it right up for you.
I second your motion.
Yeah.
And just for clarity, does the planning commission want to have that documentation provided in that request to council just for their
Yes.
awareness? Okay.
It's this, right?
This assessment tool and
But
our,
The
cover
points up
sheet,
front?
right?
yeah, the points and
Yeah,
suggestions
there
for
was a memo
additions.
and then the actual tool with the
I want to make sure the suggestions for inclusion are
we
attached
can
to
change that
assessment.
so inclusion is added to that.
Yeah.
that goal
Because
for sure.
you're gonna reference those to city council as, hey,
Structure.
this is the
Page 74.
points where we see it needing
Yes.
Right, these are
Correct.
the review points, right?
Yeah.
Right, okay. So we're seconded, right?
So we have a motion and we have second?
Yeah.
And I'll take roll call then.
I got it, we're good. All right, we've got Mr. Sullivan,
Yes.
Mr. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Hara,
Yes.
Mr. Colbert,
Yes.
Ms. Redmond,
Yes.
Mr. Kucera. All
Yes,
right, motion carries.
motion carries. Okay. Now we move on to agenda item number 10 is other business. Anybody down there have anybody? Other business? Item,
A couple things, Mr. Chair.
okay, you want to
Number
go
one,
first?
we didn't have any feedback on the DD's TCO, so I guess Rennis isn't here today, so we can't really talk to that, but we have been committed to that we would hear from them. I actually went there today. It's a lovely little shop. It's just purely a matter of process for me that we don't have a situation where all the hard work that you guys do and we do to set up ordinances and do site plan reviews doesn't matter because we're just going to let people bypass the process. So that's a very unvarnished way of saying it, but that's the spirit of it in 9:45 hour. So I just hope we can get that on the agenda officially next meeting.
That's exactly where I was heading at the same time, because when tonight's agenda was sent out, I responded right away. I'm surprised that Dee Dee's isn't on the next agenda. And the only response I got from was Mr. Tangeri that I'm out of the office and I'll get back to you, which I never got another response. I didn't get anything from our attorney or anything else. But looking at the minutes that we just approved tonight from the January 24th minutes, item 14, the legal update, Mr. Rennis said Dee Dee's will attend next meeting. Well, I've been told this 5 or 6 times, and I'm not being given a very good reason why they're not showing up. Dee Dee's had their grand opening November 11th, 2021. They've been in there all this time. They have no site plan approval. They have no temporary certificate of occupancy. I've looked up sections today, section 34-417, non-compliance with the certificate of occupancy. They can be forced with violations. There's enforcement things that can be done. The basic thing that I can find paperwork-wise is seeing as we have lost the TCO up here. We don't have it, the Planning Commission. It now belongs to the Building Department. And the paperwork is if they do not comply with the site plan or what they're supposed to be doing, it's up to the Building Department to give them a show cause hearing and force them to come in front of us, or we can have this discussion. And I've mentioned this to Rennis before, and his legal advice, I asked, how do I go about getting a show cause? His legal advice is ask your planning company, which is not a very good response from a city attorney. But that's, I have the feeling that somebody's beating around the bush here. I've been told 5 or 6 times. I don't want to put this lady out of business. I'm sure she's got a good business going. All she has to do is come in here and see us, complete the second-hand part of a site plan that was established from tribal fair beforehand. I'm not trying to be nasty about it, but by all rights,
Do we know what the second half of the plan called for?
I could dig through files and find it out. When
Because were there safety things
Tribal
there?
Fair did we split it into phase 1 and phase 2 for Tribal Fair, and they completed phase 1. They never finished phase 2 before they left. I'm sure there's simple things like striping the parking lot, handicap signs, and there's probably 3 or 4 other items on there. I think they're minor things.
Is it worth doing? I mean, I feel like there's a balance, no?
She's in there with no site plan approval or no temporary certificate of occupancy. And according to the city, if she came in and saw us for a show cause hearing, we would have the right to discuss it with her. We may even issue that the property be vacated.
That would be
until
awful.
such corrections, give me time, that we could declare the property be vacated until such corrections are made and approved by the building department. I'm not saying we're going to kick her out. That's not what I want to do. I don't want to kick her by any means, but I want to find out what's going on.
And procedurally, like if we just abandon our duty to uphold this process, why are we even here?
But I mean, that
Exactly.
happens often. Like, look at our sign ordinance, guys. But like, I just feel like
What happens often?
that we would like to write an ordinance to reference and try to allow people to follow it, but when it comes to implementing, like our sign ordinance, where all these signs were non-compliant, and we just recently removed them because we can't physically go there and make them
Not to
pay
interrupt
thousands
you,
of
but I think
dollars.
there's a misunderstanding.
It's,
Well, that's what I mean. Like this is another ordinance where it's like, well, I feel like we should kind of weigh, just like the Church of Clawson, where I was like, whoa, like, do we really want to try to put this lady? I know you
If-
said you don't
if-
want to put her out of business, but like this
That is
seems a
not
little
the
much for
discussion.
striping on a parking lot.
If we had not brought the Church of Clawson in here, trust me, that building would still look in a shambles like it did. It encouraged him to move on. That's all I want to happen here, is I want this lady to come in, do a little bit of paperwork, and move on happy with her life. You can't confuse it with sign. Sign ordinances are one thing, this is something else. What happens here is, somebody comes in and they say, we want to open a business. And we say, okay, we'll approve your site plan, but you have to do this, 4 or 5 items. They walk out that door, quite often, that's the last time we ever see them. Now, whether that's ever enforced by the building department, we have no idea, unless I can see it out there. That's what brought the Church of Clawson to my attention. I could drive by and see it, that it's not being done. But aside from that, I don't see any enforcement. I've never met the fellow from the building department. Who is the person that actually signs a temporary CFO? Do you know?
That would be Mr. Vargas.
I've never met the man, all these years.
You should go.
I have an update for you guys in the staff report, so.
Oh, so we can just stop talking, or,
About Brian.
oh.
Dee Dee's, I think Joe is prepared to engage with you guys.
It's a point of frustration to me, especially when I've been told 5 or 6 times that, yes, this will be taken care of, she'll be in here, and
It's actually been 3 times probably because what has happened since the first notification that she would be here, the city attorney and I have visited Dee Dee's personally, and we are working through the review. And so twice, because I've not gotten finished with my review in conjunction with the city attorney, I've told her, I'm like, listen, it'll be a waste of time if we have not completed our review for you to come to the planning commission. So it's on me.
okay, there's also a part of the ordinances is that if the building department does issue any temporary certificate of occupancy, they have to inform us at our next meeting. And I haven't had a building report unless Nick's got one tonight. Do you?
I'll touch on it in a few minutes.
Last meeting, you said you were going to have one, so I was just going to hold you to that if you do. I'm frustrated, and I just want to know where to turn. I wish we had some more legal advice here.
You're looking at it, and we are working on it. There have been some other things that have overcome this issue, and we're working through it.
You won't promise me that she'll be here in 2 weeks, right?
I'm not going to do that, but I'm
didn't
going
think you
to
would.
definitely work towards it, okay? So
Okay.
And if I can remember, that building, like, didn't they have a really hard time selling that? Isn't that?
They took a house,
Yeah.
got our approval to make it commercial, ran it for a while, and then when they moved out, they came in to get our approval to sell it as a residence again because they were having trouble selling it. So it's not sold as a residence, still sold as a commercial piece of property.
Okay.
So therefore, it should be treated as a commercial piece of property. And we wouldn't allow anybody else in town to just come in and do this without site plan approval.
And I'm not your legal counsel, but since Rennis is not here and this has some ramifications, I would suggest that you accept my status update on it, and we'll wait for Rennis's legal advice as well, just because I think the more that we talk about it, the more that we may potentially incur some type of legal exposure. So when in doubt,
My-
just
my-
making that suggestion.
My intent is not to chase business out of town by any means. My intent
and no
is,
one's making that accusation,
my
sir.
intent is just to keep it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And my
I
intent
can-
is to ensure that we, respect the process of the planning commission and everything that is required of our business operators and investors. So we will get this corrected to you, addressed in some type of orderly fashion.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
A couple other things,
Anything else
Mr.
for other
Chair.
business?
Yeah, on the website currently for the planning commission members, their terms are highlighted on the website. And I think I've noticed some discrepancies. Mr. Scott apparently expires later this year in December. So,
Yeah, he took someone else's term. So if, say, Mr. Solomon decides to step away from the planning commission, we'll have someone fill his spot until his term expires in probably 24, 25. So when you came in, I think you had a shorter term for a year because you filled someone else, I don't know who it was, and then you get reappointed at that time.
I got you.
And that's to kind of keep continuity to make sure there's not 9 vacancies at the same time.
Okay.
So,
Thank you for that.
yeah.
I did kind of figure out the email thing. I was asking, because it was what we used to have, which I like. Here's your name, and here's your term when you're expired. And we used to have our city email right there, and it was so easy to go and find people. Now, if you go down and you hit it for all of everybody, everybody comes up, then I guess you can single people out from that if you want. But to me, it's just pushing more buttons. It's more difficult. I think mayor and council have their picture, their title, and their city email, if it's not that difficult to put that on there.
So I've been to a couple one training this past month, I believe, and then I did the citizen planner as well. And the sentiment kind of revolves around, I can't remember the term for the life of me right now, but essentially it's to limit the engagement of specific planning commission members with developers. That way there's not certain information shared with them that's not shared with the entire body. So let's say Mr. Hara is talking to a developer on X property. The developer emails Mr. Hara for whatever reason. They have an interaction.
Mm-hmm.
They present the information that was shared to Mr. Hara wasn't shared to the public or shared to the commission. The determination is not the same because the information that was received is different. Does that make sense?
Makes sense, but who made that decision and why we were not informed about that?
Well, I believe back when it happened, I think it was a little over a year ago.
I have the
When
feeling it happened when the PUD came in across the street. I think that's exactly the time that our emails changed. That's when mine changed from G.Casera to Greg.Casera, and I was never informed on it. And like I've said before, some people are still mailing things to my old address.
I can
They
talk
think I'm getting them,
to
I'm not.
VC3 and see if we can connect both accounts
Yeah,
somehow.
there is a
There-
alias or
there's an option.
alien account, I think you put it
Yeah,
on.
and we can try and make that happen. I'll put a note down right now. I mean, if we do have that come up, then I would really strongly encourage to each one of you that if you do engage with a developer, a resident, that's shared to the public. I'm not sure there's any necessary legal recourse unless
I
that
see the
conversation goes a
point.
certain route.
I see the point of why you're doing it, but I don't think it's a legal ground that I have gone out myself, and over the years, I've gone out and talked to guys that own businesses and are building things and talked one-on-one with them. And Mr. Elbitz at the time said, "Oh, Greg, you got to be careful. You can't do that." So I'm not offering them anything. I'm just trying to figure out if I can help him, but with the city, between the two of us, work out a thing together. We're not making any promises or anything else. But I think it's kind of unfair for us to sit here and a businessman comes in and we just ignore him completely. I like the personality part of it, of dealing with the person.
Well, how else would you want to do that, I guess? I mean, if they want to engage with the planning commission, the email should go to everyone.
I don't know. I think the spirit of access is what's of debate now. So for example, do you know who your mayor is? How would you know? You would go to the website and you would look at the picture of Paula and see her information. If you had some specific feedback for her, you could say, hey, Paula, I think you should wear different clothes to the meetings or something like that. It wouldn't apply to the rest of us, but it would to her. And I believe the resident in that situation would feel like, man, I live in a great town. I have a direct line of access to that person. Or if Mr. Harris says something that they don't like, they can email me and say, I really didn't like your comments about, Didi's. I think it's not well kept at all. And you said it was a very nice looking business, Doesn't apply to everybody perhaps. And I don't have to respond to them. And there's a great deal of situations where I cannot respond to them. And if I were, I would be violating a lot of protocols. But the point is that they have access to us and they know who we are. I think that was the that was the objective in the whole thing. There is another matter, though, that it seems increasingly like the planning commissioners are minimalized in their involvement, and the administration is maximized. Little interactions, little things when things don't go perfectly. We never hear about that. It's kept from us.
Could you provide an example?
Yeah, like Dee Dee's, right? Like, there's, for some inconvenient reason that no one seems to be able to say, it's not appropriate for them to come here. It's being dealt with, we're told. We'll figure it out. I don't want to say any more. The city attorney will handle it, or something of this nature, right? In that exact example, there's a very real process that's falling apart. It's not doing what it's supposed to be doing, and I don't know if there's a reason for that or not. I don't assume that the process is broken. I just assume that one element of it is stuck somewhere. But instead of saying, hey, guys, we have a problem, we say there is no problem, and if we do have a problem, it's not a problem we're going to talk about, so just let us deal with it. That's the perception, just so you know.
If you could hold that thought for a minute, at this point, I'm going to need a roll call vote and a motion that we extend our time for another 10 minutes, because after 10 o'clock, we have to vote on that.
Motion to extend our meeting by 5 minutes after 10 o'clock.
5 minutes, any support?
Support.
Support. Roll call, please.
Was that just a 5-minute extension of the meeting?
Past 10
5
minutes, past 10 o'clock, yep.
Okay.
So
You can
we
speak
plan on
up.
being done in 5?
We're going to have to.
I would have said 10, but, you know.
Yeah, well, because planner report is all.
I have nothing else.
Okay.
Roll call.
Yeah. I think we're just, yea or nay?
Yay.
Yay.
Okay. All right, Joe? I mean, I'm sorry, you said you were done.
I'm done.
Is there anything else, Chair?
You done?
I'm done.
Okay, where does that leave us?
Planners report?
Planners report.
Oh,
Good, good.
Well, I apologize. I'll try and keep my report under 5 minutes.
Okay.
All right, so just first off, when you guys were going through your planning commission packet, we took a similar approach that we used with the city council and had a cover sheet. In that cover sheet provides like a little bit of background on the document, and then also some potential motions that can be made. It's not necessarily a recommended motion that you guys can have. It's just to give kind of more context of what the direction the discussion should go. So if the consensus is that you're leaning towards approval, the motion should be made this type of way, and if it's in denial, it should be made this type of way. That's just to help out on that front. On February 21st, during the regular city council meeting, the 4 ordinances, signing, accessory building, and then the 2 in the BRD district were approved, and those are in the process of getting codified right now. A couple of different training opportunities. One that I came across my desk today was Oakland County has a couple local official training programs for open meeting requirements, procedural rules for meetings, public access to governmental records, et cetera. I know Mr. Scott spoke to me this before the meeting, was just looking for some general, Robert Rules of Orders, that kind of stuff. So I will send some of that information out tomorrow to all of you. And then, as always, I will plug the Citizen Planner course that I think would be beneficial for all of you to do, just to give you guys more context on what everyone's role is, and that you guys can make an informed decision on site plans going forward. And then there's just one more, Planning and Zoning Essentials virtually, which is on March 21st and 22nd from 6 to 8 p.m. And that's held by the Michigan Association of Planning, and I will have all of this in an email to you guys tomorrow. And then going forward, the first Planning Commission meeting of the month, I will have a report similar to something Mr. Kucera was saying, with the specific training opportunities, as well as updates on TCOs, site plans, other projects. So that'll be at the March 14th meeting, and I don't see any issues getting that to you guys by then.
How many
Thank you.
TCOs are out right now?
I'm sorry, I don't have
You
that
don't
off the
know?
top of my head.
Not even
Off the top of
No.
your head.
Okay. More than one.
Good, we have 2 minutes
Yeah.
left.
Nick, is that zoning and planning essentials, you said we can take advantage and sign up for that?
Well, the Planning and Zoning Essentials, yes, that's a virtual one. But the Citizen Planner is the one I think,
yeah.
and I know you are currently enrolled as well as Mr. Hara. We do have one person who's completed it, Mr. Fitzer. And then, again, I'll provide all the information to you guys tomorrow. And any questions about the report?
You said that you would basically help sign me up for that?
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
I'll touch base after this.
Yeah,
so I
so
don't
I'll
waste more
send out
time.
the email tomorrow, get some feedback. I think if we can register more than one at a time, I think it might bring the cost down a little bit. So, like I said, I'll touch base with everyone tomorrow, and hopefully we can get everyone enrolled by next week at some point.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Appreciate that.
Of course.
Thank you. Agenda number 13 is legal update, and we have no legal update tonight again. So at that point, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Support.
Motion support. Roll call, please.
Mr. Kucera?
Yes.
Mr. Hara? Yes. Ms. Redmond?
Yes. Yeah.
Mr. Colber?
Yeah.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Solomon? Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
So.